What is up guys, and welcome back to another Classic Fresh video. So today we will be talking about which class is going to be the most popular in Classic Fresh, and although this is purely speculation at this point, we do have a lot of relevant data to back up these claims, and we can make some educated guesses based on the data that we currently have, as well as the changes we know will be coming in Classic Fresh. Before we move into the class discussion, I think it's important to do a quick recap of the changes that are relevant to this topic, so here we go. Raid bosses will have an increased health pool, as well as old raid mechanics will be restored, and potentially new ones added as well. Basically, raids are becoming more difficult. The main thing to look at here is the fact that raid bosses will have an increased health pool, meaning that fights will take longer to complete, meaning that classes that were already struggling with mana usage will struggle even more this time around. World buffs are not usable within raids or inside raids, and this change in itself will already spice up the meta and make certain classes playable and other classes less playable. For example, let's just look at warriors. As a warrior in Classic WoW, auto attacks was what dealt most of your damage, usually followed by heroic strike and a bunch of other random attacks. Without world buffs, you lose a lot of baseline attack power, you lose about 10% crit, and you also lose a lot of hit rating, which can be really damaging for every class, but will hit warriors even harder, as you will generate less rage. This can obviously be countered by getting your hit rating elsewhere, but the point is that with this hit rating being covered by world buffs in Classic WoW, or crit rating as well to generate even more rage, that opened the possibilities for you to go all out on damage upgrades on your gear, without caring about your hit cap. And crit cap as well. That being said, another change that we have to look at is the fact that they are removing the debuff limit on raid bosses, allowing for more debuffs to be applied to every single boss. This means that warriors can now take full advantage of their deep wounds effect, and although that did minimal damage in Classic WoW, that was because if you had several warriors in one raid setup, you would usually be reapplying one deep wound, while in Classic Fresh, each warrior will now be applying their own individual deep wound effect, and this damage will provide warriors with a significant boost over the deep wound damage from OG Classic WoW. That being said, you still lose out on a lot of rage generation by missing out on those hit ratings and crit ratings, and you miss out on 10% baseline critical strike chance, and you miss out on a lot of attack power. So will these deep wounds gains make up for your world buff losses? Probably not. That being said, it does look like warriors are still the class that most people want to play in Classic Fresh, based on, for example, this straw poll that was shared on the Classic WoW Reddit, where over 8,000 people shared which class they were going to play, and 28% said they were going to play warrior. We also have the real-life stats from the Classic Fresh open beta as well, where 28.5% of the player base on that open beta are playing a warrior, which links back to the 28% from the straw poll, meaning that these numbers are fairly accurately representing what might end up happening. Now, while we are talking about melee, or more specifically warriors and also rogues, per these straw polls, these two classes will make up almost 45% of the entire player population, which could present some problems. If you look at the Classic WoW logs, especially from late in the phases, when people had their gear, warriors and rogues usually made up 70% of a raid group, but that's where the specifics could become important. These speedruns took place late in that specific content phase, when people had full best-in-slot gear, and also full world buffs. For Classic Fresh, we won't have world buffs, and we will also have an accelerated timeline, with Classic Fresh lasting 12 months instead of the Classic WoW's 18 months or so, meaning people won't have the time to become fully best-in-slot geared, and especially for warriors and rogues, or melee classes in general, they are extremely gear dependent, and getting your best-in-slot weapons and trinkets will significantly increase your DPS. The world buffs being removed would also be a huge setback for melee characters, and these world buffs include the Warchief's Blessing, which gave you 300 hit points and 15% melee haste, Rallying Cry of the Dragon Slayer, which gave you 10% crit chance for your spells, 5% crit to your melee and ranged abilities, and also 140 attack power. Spirit of Sandalar, which was used for mage boosting, as well as a plus 15% stats, Dark Moon Fear buffs, which should give you 10% flat damage increase, or also plus 10% main stat. Dire Maul buffs that could give you attack power and critical strike chance increase, and the Fellwood Songflower, which could give you another 5% increased critical strike chance. Upon looking at these world buffs, it is clear that melee classes benefit a lot more from them, which is probably a big factor in why we saw so many rogues and warriors in Classic WoW. But once again, I also want to point out the gearing problem, and having an accelerated timeline in Classic Fresh will also mean that a lot less people will get their optimal gear, and once again, getting this gear is crucial for melee DPS. I expect that in Phase 1 we might end up seeing a lot more Hunters than we did in OG Classic WoW, especially on the Alliance side, as Hunters scale really well with Blessings of Kings, and also Blessings of Wisdom is huge for mana regen during a boss fight, and in Classic Fresh, where bosses will have more health and boss fights will last longer, having that Blessing of Wisdom is actually huge. Once Hunters get their tier 2, they can also start proccing a Find Weakness effect on raid bosses, and with debuff limits no longer being restricted, Hunters can take full advantage of this effect. Hunters will also be able to keep Serpent Sting up on bosses with 100% uptime, as long as their mana allows it, and Hunter's Mark will also be usable. The removal of debuff limits also makes meme specs viable, and less viable specs from OG Classic WoW once again become viable, such as Boomkins being viable as they can take full advantage of their damage over time effects. Retribution Paladins will be able to have a 100% uptime of their seals, and Shadow Priests might become even more viable. Personally, I think Warlocks and Shadow Priests might end up being played way more in Classic Fresh than in OG Classic, and Warlocks were already incredible, but imagine the synergy. You can use the Shadow Weaving talent from Shadow Priest talents by including a Shadow Priest into your raid setup, giving you plus 15% shadow damage. Mix that with the improved Shadow Bolt, which gives you another plus 20% shadow damage, and it could allow for some really interesting raid setups based around that synergy. As for faction balance, just to talk a little bit about that as well, I think there will be even more alliance this time around than in OG Classic WoW, meaning that for PvE it will be insanely alliance favored. With world buffs gone, Paladin's Blessings of Salvation will be huge to limit threat, as tanks will build less threat with the reduction of world buffs, but then again DPSers will also deal less damage and gain less threat. So let's get some estimates here, just to estimate what will be the top 5 most played classes in Classic Fresh, based on the statistics given by the straw poll, as well as the player data from the open beta. I'm still saying that Warrior will be the most played class, and Rogues will probably be in second place. Hunters third, because more experience gained from quests means Hunters will be able to level up way faster, as they excel at solo questing, plus they can now use Serpent Sting in raids, and overall it's just an improved experience for them. Mages are a bit of a wild card, as it's all based on what Blizzard will do with mage boosting, but if mage boosting becomes a thing, every hardcore raider will have a mage alt anyway for gold farming, but for now I'm gonna keep them in 4th place. And lastly, for 5th place, I'm gonna put Warlocks, simply because they can finally take full advantage of all of their debuff effects and damage over time abilities, as well as the fact that with summoning stones being in the game, they won't be forced to summon the whole group every time. And that is pretty much it, guys. Make sure you let me know in the comments down below what class you think will be the most popular class in Classic Fresh, and make sure you give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I plan on making a lot of Classic Fresh content, so if that's something that you are interested in, you should also consider clicking that subscribe button. And with that being said, thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you again very soon.